James Forward, Executive Director of A+ Schools.
Hi, Tiffany Gorman, Director of Strategic Partnerships.
Hi, Graham Walqueen, Systems Director.
And today we're going to be talking to you about what's going on in PPS and top 5 things you should know about the Pittsburgh Public Schools Facilities Plan. And so we're asking you to show up today. We'll start with
education. It fuels society, drives economic mobility. But right now in Pittsburgh, something's missing from this picture. Students. Too many aren't showing up often enough to do well in school. Last year, in the Pittsburgh Public Schools, over 5,500 students were chronically absent, meaning they missed at least 2 days a month for any reason. That adds up to about a third missing a month of school or more. When they don't go, they fall behind. And when they fall behind, they don't want to go. The obstacles to success become bigger and bigger. When they don't show up, they're less likely to graduate, complete college or trade school, or get a life-sustaining job. Chronic absenteeism also affects those who do show up because resources must be diverted, and teachers are stretched thin. Right now, chronic absence is one of our city's most pressing problems. It's also one of the most solvable, if we all show up. We start with the schools where chronic absence is highest. Then we coordinate existing community supports that make a difference, such as housing, transportation, health, basic needs, and family engagement. Strategies and resources that ensure all of our kids can get to school ready to learn and that school is a place where they want to be. This approach is working right now at schools like Perry High School and Arlington Pre-K 8. But we need more students to show up, and we need investment from across the city and state, businesses, nonprofits, alumni, and leaders who care about our kids. When we work together, we inspire. We solve big problems, and we're at our best, doing the work, helping our neighbor, showing up. It's a Pittsburgh thing. Let's do this, Pittsburgh. Let's show up so our kids can do the same.
That's right, folks. If we want every kid succeeding in every school every day, then all of our children are going to need communities that are safe so they can get to school on time, families having what they need so kids can get to school ready to learn, and schools where they feel they belong and are excited to be. And that's what we're trying to do with the Show Up Pittsburgh campaign. But what we know is that our current system is designed to get the outcomes that it's getting. And these outcomes should give us a sense of urgency to show up for our kids in every community and neighborhood across the city of Pittsburgh. And while graduation rates are up, this was 2023's data, 86% of PPS students graduated on time in 2023. The number of kids earning a college ready GPA is not, right? So we know because attendance is highly correlated with students earning a college ready GPA of 2.8. We know that too many aren't earning that. And that's leading to too few kids completing college or trade school within 6 years. If you look at these numbers, we have a lot of work to do, right? Only 343 kids in 2024 had completed college or trade school out of a class that started with over 1,600 students in 2014, right? That should give us all a sense of urgency because it has a huge impact on economic mobility. With nearly 70% of students in Pittsburgh that graduated from Pittsburgh Public Schools in the lower earning brackets by education, we have to change this. And so that's why we wanted to do this video today. We wanted to bring you together to kind of understand the challenges that are facing Pittsburgh Public Schools and the top 5 things that you should know about the PPS Future Ready Plan and how it's trying to address some of these challenges. We know that there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of devil in the details, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. That's why I got my colleagues here with me. But we wanted to talk a little bit about this facilities plan, the vision that it's laying out, and what we think it'll do to address current challenges. And so the top 5 things you need to know. 1, this plan is making a bet that high quality elementary schools in every neighborhood can get kids off to a good start. The second thing it's doing is saying we need to create and expand opportunities for kids in middle and high schools. And in order to do that, those schools need to be a little bit bigger, more students in them, more resources under one roof. The other reason is that we have a system that has 3 different types of schools if you're a middle schooler. K to 8, 6 to 8, or 6 to 12. You have 3 different types of school configuration. Simplifying the school system to K to 5, 6 to 8, 9, 12 is going to have more impact with resources, right? Whether it's capital costs being deferred, transportation, or others. The other thing you should know, and Graham's been watching the school board, there's no changes coming this school year. Top 5 thing you need to know. Number 4 is no changes. Why? Because if you are worried that your school's gonna close this fall, it is not. Nothing's happening at least until 2026-27, and likely there will be even further changes to the plan based on what we're seeing going forward. So nothing happening this fall. Please let your friends know. Finally, there's going to be no school closures without a restructuring and implementation plan presented to the board. So the details here that you are asking for that may not be already in the FAQs that are on the board site or in the plan, all of those details will be laid out. And so the district is committed to not making closures without a plan in place that folks have time. The most important part that I want to say is there's still time to have your voice heard in terms of how this implementation plan works. All right, so that's what we're doing. So 1, why make this investment in high quality neighborhood elementaries? Well, right now there are too many schools where either the arts teacher or the librarian or the music teacher have to be shared among buildings, and so they don't always show up, and so kids don't always get access to the same high quality enrichment and educational opportunities. The plan is to try and ensure that every kid in every neighborhood, no matter where you live, no matter where you grow up, gets access to these to these resources. And I think we can tell in some of our schools why this is important. Tiffany, talk a little bit. When we see schools like UPrep sometimes not having access to additional courses, or Perry, we know that there's some kids that because it's small, they didn't have extra courses, so some kids were taking the same arts class again in order to get their credits, right? Like that right now is happening kind of across the city. So this is one of the things that it's trying to change. Any thoughts on that, like in terms of the change there?
Yeah, sure thing. So one of the schools that we've been working closely at this year, this past school year, did not have a gym teacher all year. So they were searching for a gym teacher. They were able to recruit a staff person to come into that role, and that person did not stay very long. So that meant all of the students in that elementary and middle school did not have gym programming. They did have some partners coming in to do different movement activities and things during that time period, but those students weren't getting any gym class. So that creates stress, both with teachers having to come up with activities during a time where they, may have had some time for a break or to do some planning time. Now they have to come up with an activity to do with those students. Causes behavioral issues because there's not a structured activity for them to do that during that time, and they're also missing out on that important content. So that's an example of, a school, because there were no appropriate gym teachers that were available, that were on the sub list. That was a school of students who missed out on that opportunity.
Yeah. And why move to neighborhood elementaries, right? Well, look, right now what we see is because of the systems of choice and the varieties of neighborhoods where folks are living, we see like 87% of our neighborhood schools enroll less than half of the students from their neighborhood, right? So there's only 5 schools that have more than half of the kids that live in the neighborhood that are assigned to their school where they are going to that school, right? And so when we see a system where that's happening, there's 2 things we could say. Either give everyone choice because everyone's making choices. About 2/3 of families are making choices. Or make the school that's in your neighborhood a whole lot better. The bet that the district is making the school in their neighborhood a whole lot better by providing enough resources under the same roof so that it is a high quality school. I know there are questions about that, especially when we are saying that there will be one magnet left, Montessori, right? And that's a right question to ask. Like, how does that square with this push to neighborhood elementaries? And I would make sure you're asking folks about that. The district response has been around making sure that model continues. I think there's also opportunities to use it as a lab for pre-K looping and early grade looping, which Montessori does, which people can learn from kind of across the district. But we'll see how that plan erupts, and I think people need to continue to ask questions around that. Also, half of our regular schools have concentrated student poverty of 80% or more. And these schools lack resources because of their small size, right? So our average size of 25 of our highest concentrated poverty schools is 276 students. Graham, what happens when you have too few students in a building to cover classrooms? What happens in terms of the staffing?
Our resources, including and especially staffing, get spread thin. So we end up having different opportunities available at different schools. And one of the big factors that we've seen determining the availability of those resources is how big that school is.
Right. So regardless of what you say, like two big things drive why this happens, right? So one, the student enrollment's driving staffing for a lot of reasons. One, the union contract has requirements for class sizes and number of periods that can be worked, right? So when you have that, it means that you have to have a certain number of people in the building. So say you have 32 kids. Well, what's going to happen is those 32 kids are going to get 2 teachers in the elementary level. So there's actually 2 classes of 16 students for those 32 children with coverages, and you've created redundancies. But what happens if you have 25 kids? You only get 1 teacher under the contract, right? And so you'll have bigger class sizes in smaller schools often and less coverages. So you have to make sure there's a substitute for that teacher, versus if there's 2 teachers of the same grade, you might be able to shift off, work together, collaborate. And so that's part of the challenge that we're seeing. The other thing is, those budgets, the school budgets, the dollars that we have are driven mostly by staffing. And so that's what creates the money that's going into schools and how we see the money being spent. We have too many buildings with too few students. And so with less than half full, it means we're not able to utilize all of the spaces and places in our district well. And so part of what we're trying to do is say, hey, what if we spent less on some of the administrative or maintenance staffing that needs to happen in these buildings, so that you could then invest that right back into the classroom. That's the bet that's being made by the district by investing in small neighborhood schools. The other thing that leads to, right, you talked to go back to this idea of high concentrated poverty. Well, high concentrated poverty buildings are schools where chronic absence is likely to be higher. You're 4 times more likely to be chronically absent if you're living in poverty in this country than if you're not, right? And we know why. Access to a car, medical care, child care, all of those things you just have less backup when you're broke. And as a child of a single mom, I know the choices she had to make sure we got to school or had care. She relied on a whole series of aunts that were not my blood family, but family by community. And so that's how we were able to manage getting to school every day. But it was a struggle, and I know families are struggling with that. And that's why we see, as you increase the concentration of students living in poverty, you see a trend, not a correlation, but a trend towards higher rates of chronic absenteeism in those schools. What this also means is if you're Black or brown in this city, you're more likely to go to one of these schools of concentrated poverty, right? And what that does is that creates a lot of problems for you, because you're likely to be in a school where more kids are being caught up more often. And so the ability to provide rigorous instruction is lessened when you're having to catch kids up. And then because they're smaller staffed, there's not often another support person to help out to say, hey, can I pull you out to kind of catch you up on something you missed? There's usually not a person there to do that, right? Why we're building out the Show Up campaign and need people to show up for our schools, for our community organizations that are providing things for kids, is because we know there's still going to be schools of concentrated poverty even when this plan goes into effect, right? And so we're going to have to show up and add more support so our kids get what they need to be successful. The flip side is that kids that are white in this city are going to schools with less concentrated poverty, right? 50% of the students in those buildings are economically disadvantaged, right? And so we see a huge divide between the experience of white parents and families and students and Black parents and families and students in this district. And I think that's where one of the things that we recognize is if we want to get to a better school system, we have to create more diverse by design schools where we can adequately get to and support all the needs of students, regardless of background in our school system. Second thing this plan is trying to do is improve access to opportunities in the upper grades, right? So this is the middle school schedule. It's going to have advisory with the house system through the Ron Clark Academy. They're going to try and do that in every one of the middle schools. Arts labs, music, phys ed, tech ed, really investing in STEAM across of them, and then putting more teachers and students in selected buildings, right? And why are we doing that? Well, when Graham can talk about this, I can talk about this. Like, right now, we have a system where only 10% of 6th to 8th graders took algebra, and there were 10 schools with grades 6 to 8 that didn't offer algebra 1, in part due to size. So what does this mean? Well, it means kids from certain middle schools are trying to get up to a high school to take algebra, which is possible for some, but not for all, or they're just not taking it at all, even if they're ready. And so that to me is something that we shouldn't be allowing to happen. We know that algebra is a gateway to upper level math and college readiness. And so if we want kids to have access to it, we have to create the conditions for it. And one of the things that can create the conditions for it is a bigger middle school. Any thoughts on that from the team in terms of those access to opportunities?
Yeah, just to reiterate that, we talked about how resources are spread thin when we have many small schools, and this is just one example of that. And I think that when especially in our current system, when there are selective magnet programs that require experience with a foreign language, looking at these numbers and seeing just how much of the district is closed off from the selective magnets that require a world language or a different one that requires high scores in algebra, and if you're not able to take algebra, it sort of shuts off access to you.
That's right. I mean, and then you see in high school, right, the difference between what Alderdice and Brashear are able to offer, even in terms of AP courses, right, versus Westinghouse and Perry, right, very different. And the reason is the size, right? And so smaller high schools just aren't able to offer as many AP courses, right, with the difference, the big difference, 30 APs are offered at Alderdice, only 3 offered at Perry. Now we've been working at Perry. Can you talk a little bit, Tiffany, about what we've been trying to do at Perry to change the trajectory even with only 3 APs being able to be offered?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working with community partners at Perry is bringing in more project-based learning. So looking at having students have the capability to kind of interact with some different types of subjects, thinking about things like the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild coming in and doing, partnering with a chemistry teacher at Perry and doing a science of glazing lesson. So students were actually making glazes for ceramics and kind of working with different chemical components. They brought a raku kiln up to the parking lot, got to fire those, and then had some hands-on kind of experience about what that looks like.
Right.
So how did those different chemical components affect, the color of the glaze, the viscosity, all those sorts of things. And then, then looking at getting those students into programming at Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. So looking at deeply partnering with those organizations that are surrounding our schools and helping them kind of build in some ways to engage with students in learning.
I mean, that's the thing, right? We are blessed with so many great community resources, and it does take some planning time and support. But now that we've done that with Perry, they're doing that every year now. And so that throughout the year, there are embedded project-based learning from the Carnegie Science Center, Warhol Museum, Artist Image Resources, Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, Moonshot Museum, Will Allen Foundation. I mean, there are a ton of folks up there embedding into coursework and providing supports for kids, including the Justice Scholars Institute. Now, if you send your child to Perry or Westinghouse or UPrep, you have an opportunity to take college and high school classes from Pitt and earn college credit at Pitt. This past year, a little over 70 students took college and high school student classes at Perry, earning college credit, many of them earning college credit at Pitt. And so those credits are likely transferable to most places, not always, but likely transferable in lots of cases. So earning that, though there's not APs, there are opportunities that we can build as a community if we work together and show up for our kids. The other thing we know is that our gifted programming, where we send kids to a student center, 65% of those kids come from 8 schools. So it's really serving a small population. And we know we can deliver gifted programming at school level in a good way. Dilworth is an example of where that's happened, and that's actually had benefit for all the kids in the building. So changing that structure is probably to the benefit of kids, and again, getting our students more access to those opportunities by exposure, by having those resources under the roof rather than kids having to leave the building in order to get them. Speaking of getting more resources under the roof, let's just talk about the real of what we have here in the city of Pittsburgh, which is enviable across any urban school system that I go visit. When I visit other districts and I tell them this set of facts, they are blown away. So one, we have a small student teacher ratio of 11-to-1. That means that we have the ability to provide greater support for kids. But because those teachers are spread out across multiple buildings and many in our high schools, now our students aren't always able to experience that, right? And so you do have places where class sizes are bigger. We pay our teachers well. We have made a commitment as a city, and I'm so proud of us for doing it. We pay our teachers well, with the median salary for our teachers over $100,000. So we have great pay for our teachers, which does lead to lower turnover. Doesn't mean it's easy to hire folks in or subs in when we need them, right? We have lots of staffing challenges. Our funding is solid. We have over $30,000 in per pupil spending in the 22-23 school year. That's not even including charters, right? So that's just for PPS, over $30,000. And then we have abundant community supports, being fourth per capita in philanthropic giving in the US. That great community of resources that we have here in our nonprofit sector. So we want to take advantage of that and make sure that that's going well. And it's hard to do if you have too many buildings, right? We currently are facing a teacher shortage in the state of Pennsylvania and across the country, with almost a third the number of students getting teacher certification in 2019-2020 versus 2010-2011. Like, that in and of itself is a challenge for how we're going to fix the buildings. And when you see what kids from 2009 to 2019 said they wanted to be, being an educator has dropped significantly in terms of what kids who took the SAT said they wanted to be coming out of college. So we have a real challenge in staffing buildings, and that means there's just not enough subs for our number of schools. Tiff, can you talk a little bit about what second graders in one of our schools experienced this past year?
Yeah, so in one of the schools that we worked with last year, there were some staffing challenges around a second grade classroom. And so those students were then moved to other grades, right? So they were not having a consistent second grade teacher. Some of them may have been moved to first grade, some of them may have been moved to third, while they were searching for that teacher to be a long-term sub for that classroom. So, that causes obviously tons of issues with learning, with consistency, with looking at, parent engagement and relationships with parents because of the confusion that comes along with that.
Yeah, and this isn't just one school. We know of a middle school where the principal was teaching math classes. We know of another elementary where the third grade teacher was out and unable to find a building sub or sub, so kids were again placed in other grades and lost out on critical learning in third grade. And so right now the challenge is, yes, could we try and fix our systems to try and hire more people? Sure. But let's be real, there's not a lot of folks out there that want to be teachers right now or subs. And so part of what this plan will do is put more teachers under one roof, allowing for better coverages and making it a little simpler to bring people on to cover and support staff. At least that's our hope, right? We want that to be able to happen because we don't want kids not getting grade level rigorous instruction because there's just not coverage for them. The other thing this plan is, they say they will do, right, and Graham can talk a little bit more about this, is just there are supposed to be some cost savings. Now, we know people are digging into those numbers, Graham, but overall what we're seeing is close to $70 million in capital cost avoidance and about a little over $5 million in savings that they're projecting on transportation. What do you think in terms of those capital costs and cost savings? Year over year kind of doesn't feel like it's a lot, right? They're kind of saying that's over time it will only average out to be about $2.5 million a year. But what does that mean for investment in schools when you don't spend the amount of money that we are planning to spend on some of these buildings.
Right, exactly. And I think the first most obvious one is that frees up a lot of capital to address other buildings that we want to be putting more students into.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that, a lot of our building projects are financed with debt, which then if those projects are taken away, removes a lot of the incentive that is put on the board to raise taxes and find other revenue sources. James talked about the sort of investments that we make in our teaching force and the different learning supports, and that is who is doing the education. So those are really the to me the most important investments that we can make are the people that are actually delivering that education. Obviously, they need to do so in a physical building that is set up in a way that is able to for students to learn. And a lot of our buildings just they aren't built for 21st century learning.
Right.
A lot of them weren't built for 20th century learning. So just looking at some of the physical state of the buildings, and you can see a lot of the information that's available through the capital plan and in this facilities report that's on the district's website. And you can dig into some of those numbers, and I know that the people, us included, are anxiously awaiting some of those updated numbers from the district, which we can talk about now, or we can talk about in a minute, sort of the changes that the school board has made to that plan and some of the requirements that they're putting on the administration.
Yeah, let's get there in just 1 second. I mean, one thing though I want to make sure folks know though is like when we do this 3 different configurations, then we can build out, the other part of the plan that's not talked about a lot is building out a teaching academy, right? To invest more in our teachers. When you have the ability to have coverages and people be able to go out, you can go out and do teacher-led learning a lot more easily. And so having teacher academies for K to 5, for 6 to 8, and for 9 to 12 will allow for differentiated learning for our adults in the system to get better at getting better in the classroom. So number 4, there's no changes this fall. 25-26 school year, no changes. But Graham, what happened at legislative that people should know about? And what did this vote this last week actually mean?
Yeah, so this past Wednesday, the board of directors for the Pittsburgh Public Schools approved the board item that formally opens the public comment process that is required under state law in order to close an educational building. So the 9 buildings that were on that list, that now the process is formally open to receive public comment on the closure of those facilities of the Baxter School, which houses the Student Achievement Center, the Friendship School building, which houses the Montessori program, Fulton K-5, McKelvey, which houses the Miller Pre-K-5 program, Morrow, Schiller, Spring Hill, Wolslayer, and Manchester. And so one thing that was added to this during that board meeting on Wednesday was an amendment to that item that requires that before the board can take any formal school closure vote, that the administration has to submit and the board has to approve both a reconfiguration plan and an implementation plan. So that reconfiguration plan is the changing of the grade bands and going to a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 district-wide. And the implementation plan are the nuts and bolts of how this is all actually going to happen. So the transportation numbers, the actual feeder pattern lines, which is another thing that the district released following that meeting, is a find your school tool. And so that you can go there and punch in your address and see where your attendance zone and feeder pattern for if this plan would be approved, what it would look like.
Right. And so, for folks that were concerned about, I don't know where my child would go, at least this tool, you can have a sense of that. There were some great questions raised at the public hearing, right? Like if my child is currently in a magnet, does my child get to stay? At the elementary level, the answer right now is no, but there was a lot of concerns around that and potential for change, I think, in that area. But the current plan is if you're in a magnet in elementary right now, you would then be reassigned and moved back to your neighborhood school, right? So if you have a concern about that, please raise that. There are opportunities for raising that. Let me just walk you through the planning, the process, the timeline that we know of. The vote on closures and reconfiguration plan allegedly is going to happen this fall. If I were betting, I would say that pushes more towards winter, but we will see. then because it's going to take 90 days from the point of the hearing that's had on the school closure, right? So there's 9 buildings closed, but there are a ton of other restructuring, right? Schiller's basically moving to Allegheny, so the closure of the building you have a public hearing on, but that moving and restructuring requires also some planning and thought that they are working through right now. This 25-26 school year would be a transition planning and communications year. Right now, the plan is in fall of 26, there's closing all of the schools that they plan to close and reconfiguring the district, except for the Gifted Center and Spring Hill. Those would stay open for 1 more year. Gifted Center would stay open for 1 more year. Spring Hill would stay open for 2 more years. Right? In 2027, the Gifted Center would close and all of those students would go transition to homeschools. And then in 2028, Spring Hill would close and a new Northview Heights School would open. The reason why Spring Hill's taking a couple years is because it'll take a couple years to get Northview Heights where they want it, so that it can serve children pre-K to 5. Like Graham said, that's the thing. And so again, these closures aren't going to happen without these plans in place. So I would encourage you, read the entire report. You can go to the website Future Ready. If you just Google PGH Schools Future Ready or PGH Schools Facilities Plan, it'll come up. They have a great list of FAQs that answer a lot of these questions, talk about the vision and why they're there, but you can also scan this if you're watching. Here's the big overview for the plan is in there, but I've added a couple slides here for it so you have a sense of it. And if your organization wants to host a feedback session, you can let PPS know. There are links on the site that allow you to say, hey, we want to do this. If you're an out of school time partner provider, Hannah Bitely, who is our contact in out of school time, has sent out a link so you can sign up. But really, there is an opportunity here to continue to make this plan better. It is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We have questions too, but I do think the idea that we need to make some changes to improve the outcomes for kids is clear as day based on the data. We have a highly segregated system that's not serving all children well, especially Black and brown kids. So we have work to do. And so this plan is a good start, I think, but it requires us to continue to provide feedback, to make suggestions, and to really talk about what we could do to make it better. But we've got to make some changes if we want to improve things for our kids systemically. Graham, Tiffany, anything else you want to add about how people can show up for our kids?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate a couple things about what happened this week. That there's no changes for the upcoming school year. The vote that happened is not the vote that closes schools. It begins that process, so that just want to reiterate that there is still time for your voice to be heard. So please reach out to the district, your school board members. If you're a representative organization, the district would love to work with you to make sure that your constituents are being heard, and just that there has not been any decision to close any schools happening yet, so there's still time to have your voice heard.
Yep. And just keep an eye on A+ School social media. We'll be sure to share any of the upcoming engagement sessions, anything PPS shares. We'll make sure we'll share that out to our followers.
Yeah, and be on the lookout for some back to school opportunities. We're going to be out there door knocking, meeting with families, supporting our school staffs in buildings where there's high chronic absenteeism to really start the year off right and do some support from our community of our schools in terms of communications with families and engaging with them. So be on the lookout for that. We can use your volunteer support. We can use your donations as well. And thanks everyone. Appreciate this. This was a fun first try. Appreciate you being with us through the hiccups. Bye.